Welcome back. You're watching Commodity Champions. And the United States that is looking to increase the number of gas pipelines to boost the amount of oil and gas exports. That's the word coming in from the country's Under-Secretary of Energy, Mike Menezes, in a conversation with Parikshit Luthra about USA's production plans for the coming year and demands from OPEC countries. Listen in.
Joining us today to talk about US-India energy ties is Mr. Mark Menezes, who is the principal advisor on energy policy to the US government. Keeping the internal target in mind, currently, if I'm not wrong, US is producing about 11.7 million barrels per day.
That is correct. Very good.
And what's the outlook for 2019 as far as the production is concerned?
I think we're up to, if I recall correctly, EIA projects even a higher number. I think we're into maybe 12.1 million barrels per day. And the U.S., you should know, we're not alone in infrastructure issues. We're looking to increase pipelines to get more of the both natural gas and oil out to be able to export even more. So we see a positive upside to that.
You know, very ambitious target. You've got OPEC taking place, and the signs are that OPEC nations, along with Russia, want to cut down production by at least 1 million barrels per day or 1.5 million barrels per day. And President Trump has been very vocal. He has been saying that this cannot happen. You have to let the world enjoy a tax cut, world enjoy low oil prices. What's your view currently, and what would be the message to OPEC nations, and what's really your expectation?
Well, our message is the same as President Trump's. I mean, as the Department of Energy, we wholeheartedly support the call for all OPEC nations to continue the production, to keep energy affordable to the citizens of all nations that depend on oil, for their energy sources. I think you see the reaction from OPEC because the U.S. has become such a competitor to the OPEC nations. This is a phenomenon that they have not had to deal with historically. So we see this as positive. When OPEC and Russia are getting together to try to figure out ways to address the fact that the U.S. is producing and affording our partners, allies, countries that share our values, they no longer have to be subject to OPEC, to contracts with OPEC countries. And we hope that they turn to the U.S. We're offering that choice. We're not necessarily guaranteeing the lowest choice, but we're offering a commodity on terms that they can understand, and they do not have to be held hostage by OPEC countries or Russia.
Right. Any plan B if this meeting, if the announcement doesn't go in U.S. government's favor?
Well, I think it will continue to be the plan that we have, that we will produce as much as we can to meet the supply. What we hope is that the demand for U.S.-produced oil continues to be high. And that is one way that we will continue to be able to offset the actions taken by any OPEC countries.
Right. Moving along to the JCPOA and sanctions on Iran, U.S. government has granted a waiver to 8 nations, including India. What is the conditions under which India has been granted those waivers? What is the time period for that? And if after 6 months India wants to continue importing oil from Iran, is that a possibility? Will the U.S. government be fine with that?
Well, first, let me thank India and recognize that India joins in the U.S. Goal on restricting exports of Iranian oil for the purposes that I think we both share. All of the waivers that the U.S. have granted, are unique to the countries, to each individual country, and to be sure, India has its own unique sets of circumstances. And so the U.S. recognized that, granted the waiver. You are correct. We will review in 6 months. At that point, we will then make decisions based on, the facts and circumstances as they are in 6 months. As you know, our goal is for zero export of Iranian oil. We've made that absolutely clear. We stand by that, and we hope that our partners and friends, help us achieve that goal.
India has been sending this message to OPEC nations, US, and all others that we're an energy-reliant country, and we need to really keep our consumers in mind. And if we drastically reduce oil imports from Iran or cut them down to zero, it will impact our economy. What does the US feel about this argument?
Well, the U.S. is sensitive, of course, to all countries' arguments about, prices of oil. We are very sensitive to that. I mean, we, unlike other nations, our price of gasoline at the retail pump is tied to the global price of oil. So we are very sensitive to it. We share the same concerns that India shares, and indeed, our economy, too, is driven on the price of oil. So what we have seen, though, is with the U.S. now being an exporter, it has moderated the prices of oil. We have heard now for the last several months that the price of oil inevitably will go up. And we haven't seen that, have we? It has steadily declined. Supply has increased, demand has continued to increase, and the prices have been moderate. So the economies of all the countries of the world can continue to grow. So we share that view, and we care about it very much. So we'll be looking, very closely at what actions are taken, and we're prepared to take whatever steps, we think that we can to
and for
respond.
the global community, the U.S., considering the amount of oil it's manufacturing today, will really take care of the demand. If there is a cut in imports from Iran, U.S. will fill in that gap.
Well, the U.S. alone, of course, can't produce enough to meet, the global demand. Global demand per day is 95 million barrels per day or something like that. And we're producing 11.7, to give you an idea. So we're up over 10%, right? So the U.S. alone might not be able to. But when you look at all the countries that can produce, and we're calling on those countries to produce, and we're calling on the OPEC countries too. I mean, look, for their revenue income, they have to produce, right? I mean, if they cut production, they know that for every barrel they cut, they are not getting paid, right? Those are lost revenues. So they have to decide if they're going to cut production, they know they're cutting revenues. So the art in this is to figure out how much to produce to meet demand and to keep price at a price that will allow the continued exploration, and export of the oil, of the commodity. So,
right. Mr. Menezes, thanks very much for speaking to CNBC TV 18.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so that's the U.S. official word coming in that they are now an exporter, that they also are looking at increasing their market share, keeping oil prices affordable. And when it comes to the Iran sanction waivers, that of course is up for renewing in next 6 months rather. With that, but that's just a wrap on this edition of Commodity Champions. Thank you so much for watching.